Welcome to the Four Gardens podcast. I'm Jake Gibson. In this episode, we'll continue to focus on health, which is the first garden of the Four Gardens approach. I'll be speaking with Sonia Zilberman about emotional health. Sonia is a somatic therapy practitioner, relationship coach, and sacred medicine facilitator, helping people cultivate authentic self-expression, intimate relationships, and ease in their lives. I'm currently receiving coaching and therapy from Sonia and have learned so much about how to feel and to express my emotions in healthy ways. I have more space to feel what I'm feeling. I have tools and strategies to move and work with my emotions, and I've had so many realizations and gifts working with Sonia. This is her second appearance on the podcast, and in her first episode, we talked about intimate relationships as a sacred and courageous undertaking. If you haven't already checked this out, definitely go back and listen to that one as well. Today, I'm here as always with Ari Rubens, my co-host. Ari, what are some of your takeaways from this episode?
This is one episode that I wish I would have listened to 10 years ago or even before, and my life would have been totally different. Every minute here is gold, and my favorite part was how she explains how she interacts with clients during sessions, and specifically on an empowering courage to step into more of the harder emotions, to feel like, how can you be with anger and be fully with it? So a lot of gold here.
I was on the edge of my seat for this one. It definitely felt like one of the most vulnerable episodes for me on my end, because Sonia is my therapist and we do go pretty deep in this conversation. I just feel like there's so many good tips, things that are applicable in this episode to me that I'm going to use. I think listeners will find incredibly valuable. It's also great that it was such a beautiful episode because it's the 50th episode of the Four Gardens podcast. So let's celebrate that right now. A little applause for sure.
Yes.
Ari, this is, want to honor you too for your part in this whole project. So much you contributed and we've both done to keep this project going. And hopefully people out there listening have been inspired and reached by some of these messages that have been so beautiful to share.
Emotionally, I'm feeling joyful and happy with where we've come with this podcast. It's been a year and we've had now thousands of listens. Thank you for tuning into this podcast, my friends, and look forward to sharing this upcoming 50th episode with you.
I'm grateful for you too. Let's jump right in with Sonia.
So when we talk about emotions, I really want to invite you, if you're listening, to just feel your body and feel where it feels. And what is it that you're feeling? Is it anger, sadness, fear, joy? Emotions are a reaction to external stimuli that we feel on our body, which is like a compass guiding us home and informing us of what is going on inside of us in reaction to the external world.
Why is it then that I want to always escape my emotions? I notice in my life, I've spent so much time running from my emotions or repressing them or disconnecting. So what is it about emotions, this information coming in from inside me, that makes it so common for humans to want to ignore it or escape it or deny it?
Yeah, like we all don't want to feel, feeling our emotions, feeling our life force energy. It's the essence of being alive, the essence of being human. We are here on this planet to feel. And when we feel the most alive, the more connected with ourselves, with others. And the problem, well, it's not a problem, but the trick with feeling is that when we feel one thing, we feel them all. So when we choose to feel, we're going to also feel those really uncomfortable things that we don't want to feel. The feelings of our anger, of the fears that are coming up, of the sadness, along with the joy. And, a lot of these defense mechanisms, these strategies about not feeling, they come from really young places in us, when our needs weren't met when we were children. And how do we not feel those places? Because when we were young, if our needs, our connection wasn't met, our kind of prehistorically wired brains, for that, it means death. So in order to survive, in order to connect with our caregivers as really young children, the defense mechanism, the strategy is to cut off those feelings. And this is how we show up in the world again as adults. We choose not to feel them so that we can employ these strategies of sort of staying connected. But the problem with these strategies is that they don't always work. In fact, a lot of times they don't get our needs met fully, but it sort of protects us from these deep, really deep places that are really difficult to feel.
Give some examples of the common strategies, just to make it a little clearer too, because I know I have numbing strategies, but it sounds like you're talking about some other types of strategies too. So what are a few of these?
Yeah, so the numbing strategies, they're part of the suite of strategies that we employ, that we create as really bright, capable little kids of protecting us from our feelings. And these strategies usually fall into one of two categories: the fight or the flight. Of course, people also talk about the freeze, but for me, the freeze is part of the flight, because we live in a dualistic world and we're either moving towards something or moving against it. And so the flight is really, the freeze is part of the flight, the numbing. So I was actually moving through this morning about my kids and the pain of moving through a divorce for a little child. Yeah. And it's something that we don't want to feel, that little kids don't want to feel. The pain of not having a single house, the pain of your parents not modeling the love, the safety, the emotional safety, the structure. And if a little child was really tapped into all of those feelings, they might get so overwhelmed with their sadness, with their anger, with their fear. So they stuff it down. And it becomes a place where we don't want to go there. You know? And how may this show up in an adult? It may show up in not wanting to feel the sadness of relationships falling apart, and so you will pull back from relationships in order to protect your heart in this way.
A lot of your work is the strategies to feel, right? To bring people back into feeling everything instead of feeling nothing, or because we can't choose.
Yes, absolutely. You know, the majority of people, including me, absolutely, the majority of people, majority of the time, are unconscious of their feelings, are unconscious of their life force, of their manifesting potential, of their power as a human being, as an embodied spirit. We don't want to face these places and take responsibility for them. Feeling our feelings means taking responsibility for our lives. And the majority of times, especially in our society, especially with our upbringing, you know, we want to scroll social media. We want to get that drink or smoke that joint or buy that pair of jeans or go on that vacation for entertainment or whatever, to not really sit with what's going on inside of ourselves and take responsibility. And our emotions, you know, I work with the emotional body as it relates to the physical body. We have many layers of consciousness that if you do this work, you become more and more sensitive and more perceptive to your experience in more and more subtle ways. You know, I really love the work of Barbara Brennan in talking about this as well. And, you know, I come from the School of Core Energetics, which has this experience as well. We go from the gross experience to the more and more subtle experiences. And the emotional body is one that is connected to the physical body in a more subtle experience. Our emotions, they live in our body. They're not like in this headspace in stories. When we're in story, we're usually not feeling anything. We're like in a mental loop about the past or about the future. We're not in the present. The emotions, they live in the present, in our bodies. And one way to tap into them is to move our body in a conscious and intentional way. So a lot of the work that I really love to do is work with people in the body. So if somebody is having a lot of like repressed anger or repressed sadness, maybe even fear, one of the most effective things is to just hit a pillow, hit things, push a wall, feel your energy come in contact with something else. And when you feel your energy come in contact with something else, you're feeling your emotions. You feel where they live in your body. Do they live in your heart, in your pelvis, in your head, in your jaw, in your hands, in your feet? So much information comes up when we choose to feel our body intentionally. And then we start understanding, are these feelings new or are they familiar? Sometimes I know that when I would get really sad and I would feel really unloved, maybe it's a argument with a partner or something in my family of origin kind of came up again, and I would feel like small, and my body would actually get small, and I might go sit and cry in the corner, which happens, it happens. At some point, and right now, because of all the work I've done, that point comes much quicker than before. I start realizing how young I feel in this place and how these feelings are so familiar and how they're actually not about what's happening in the here and now, but what happened to me when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. The experiences in my childhood, which made me feel unseen and unloved and unheard. And how I'm lining up my current experience in front of those experiences. And my trees agree with me. And how it's difficult to tease apart what's happening right now and what happened before when we're not conscious of what we're feeling. So the questions are, what am I feeling? And I like to work with the primary emotions: anger, sadness, fear, or joy. There's 4 of them. And they're primary because babies learn to recognize them on the facial expressions of their caregivers. So actually all of our relating superhighways are built in the channels of anger, sadness, fear, and joy. And those emotional currents, they're one current. Those emotions run in the same energetic current in our body. So if we block off our anger and we block off our fear, we're also blocking off our availability to tap into our joy. So my work is to help people feel more so that they can take more responsibility for their life, have more joy in their life, tolerate places of pain without collapse into a very young, helpless victimhood place, and manifest life on purpose. That's the work that I do for myself and the work that I share with my clients.
That really describes my experience of working with you. So I think I found that to be really clear. I certainly beat up a lot of the pillows in your house when we were doing in-person sessions. That was definitely part of it. And the question about the primary emotions, that's one I now ask myself, which of these 4 emotions am I feeling? I've noticed my vocabulary shifted. Mm-hmm. I stopped describing myself as anxious or stressed. And I'm like, am I feeling fear? Am I feeling sadness? I go past that. Just I'm tense in my body and I'm uncomfortable to what is the emotion here? So that's a question I use all the time. And one other piece of this too is I'm used to going to therapy and doing a lot of storytelling. I just talk and talk and talk in the beginning. That's how I was doing it. And I think it served me in some points, and other points it didn't. And that is not the rhythm of working with you, who brings me right into my body, who brings me right into what I'm feeling, and you don't have so much, I wouldn't say it's patience. It's not about patience. It's not the right word is. So maybe I'll let you name this. And when someone comes to you with a lot of stories, how do you cut through that? How do you hold someone accountable to what they're feeling in their mind?
What a beautiful question. And, with people who've done their work before, it's a lot easier to pierce the stories. And sometimes we need to really hold space for the stories as well until the person has enough trust and courage to go through those stories. And that is really the art of the work. When do we hold space for the stories, and when do we push, our clients to penetrate them. And it really, and the kind of the litmus test for it is how well can a person stay in their body. And all of us, like looking at early childhood development, like little kids, their processors are like amazing. Little kids' processors are genius. But what do they need to process information and work out their solutions? They don't need a caregiver to like tell them what's right or wrong or how they should be doing it. Or they don't need them to like stop being sad or stop crying or like put on your big girl pants. No, like what a child really needs is to feel emotionally safe, for somebody to just be there with them and sit with them, maybe hold their hand, maybe hug them, maybe just reflect back what they're feeling. It's so important for little children, and we're all little children walking around in big people's shoes, right? Like we're all little children. Is to feel safe enough to feel heard and seen. We just want to feel safe exactly where we are without having to change. Like that is like the balm on our wounds. And so underneath the stories, there's always emotions, and there's always this underlying need to be seen exactly as you are.
Observing children too, the way they work with their emotions. I notice how children, they'll feel very sad and then they'll be happy again really quickly often. But what I'm hearing you say too is that interrupting those feelings, not being with them, can be the problem, can be the root of, if that's the pattern, in a parenting style or teaching style, is, oh, don't feel sad. Oh, don't feel, stop being mad. It's not okay to be mad. Anger is bad. Sadness is bad. That's just creates all the problems that you're needing to unravel 20 years later, right? With people, or 30 years later. So I just am seeing that learning from what you're saying, that being with them is the way to support.
Absolutely. And when I talk about children, I'm talking about adults too, because we're all children. It's like, who has told somebody, oh, stop crying? Guilty. Who has been told to stop crying? Guilty. Yes. Has that ever worked? Like ever? Unless it's been a place of duress and you're freaked out that unless you stop crying, it's going to get even worse. Also been in that place. But it's like, when has it helped somebody to say, don't be stressed. Don't be stressed. Don't cry. Don't be anxious. Oh, don't be sad. Don't be sad. Like, no, that doesn't work. We really need to feel those places and feel sad and feel safe to feel those places, to move through them. And so my work is really tapping into those places and allowing them, creating a safe space for them. One of the things that I really love, like I love so much in my practice, is when clients bring me their anger at me. It's like, you weren't there. You had to go try, you didn't see me. You didn't meet me the right way. And like the courage of bringing that conflict into a relationship is so beautiful, because most times, people come to me and they haven't been met in their anger. They haven't been met in their feelings, in their needs. And for me to be able to hear somebody, to show up in like creating a safe space for somebody to rewire that and hear their anger and meet it in relationship, and not try to repress it, blame it, shame it, explain it away, say, no, you're wrong. Actually, this is why I did this. Like, who cares? Person's angry. Be angry, And in that place, when somebody's just allowed to show up in that place and feel seen in it, it's like that anger just moves through and you feel so much closer in the relationship, and the relationship gets stronger, and we see each other, and there's a newfound trust that allows us to go deeper. And this holds true for all relationships, whether it's with children, whether it's with our partners, whether it's with our clients, seeing the other person in their feelings. It's, when talking about mental health, emotional health, physical health. When we're really thinking about energy as it moves from the subtle to the gross, and our consciousness moves from the gross to the subtle, if there's energy that's stuck in the subtle and it's not moving, it is going to manifest in the gross. And so, of course, there's no way to explain away sickness and actually saying, well, you got sick because of this reason, because you're not feeling your emotion. That's like blaming the person. Like, that's the worst thing you can do. That's the opposite. But in moving our emotions through our body, we can feel more alive. And that resonates in our physical health as well. We start taking responsibility for it.
I want to hear more of the stakes too, of what is possible from the bravery, from the courage of going in. Even some examples from your life, what you feel comfortable celebrating too, of what's open for you by doing this work.
Let me take like 3 hours or maybe 5 days to answer this question.
Yes.
I think it can all be summed up in moving from a place of victimhood in my life to a place of sovereignty. And when I say victimhood, I don't mean a place where, some people have been impacted by certain events in their life when they have been felt an experience of powerlessness and victim. Victimhood is different from being a victim. Victimhood is an experience that life is happening to me and I don't have the power to control it. It's a place of powerlessness, right? This person is doing that to me. They're making me feel this way. If only they change, I would feel better. If only I had this partner in my life or that job in my life or this amount of money, I would feel good. My problems would be solved. And this is a place of victimhood to the external. This is a place where we give all of our power, all of our life force away to somebody else or to something else. And then we get to blame them. That's the best part. We get to blame them for not being happy, for our unhappiness. Right? And this is a trap because there's no way that somebody can make us happy. There is no way that a certain amount of money or the perfect partner or the whatever can make you feel the amount of love that you want to feel inside. Now, that is not to say that you don't deserve all those things. Absolutely, you deserve those things. But how do you take responsibility for bringing them into your life? And that all stems from feeling our feelings. If we feel our feelings and we understand what we're feeling in relationships to an external circumstance, we can understand where it comes from. We can understand our boundaries. We can express our boundaries in a way that does not shame, blame, or put down the other person. And we can start creating our life on purpose through our boundaries, through our communication, through our expression of needs. It stops being about them and becomes about us.
We're covering boundaries in my men's group tonight. So I'm going to take that arc you made of feelings to victimhood to boundaries as a beautiful, the way you went through that was really interesting. And I think that too, around this victimhood piece, I also notice attachment coming up is a word that comes up around victimhood. When I'm feeling like I'm being coming from victimhood or witnessing others, there can be this is one of the shadows of, I think, not being embodied and getting into the feelings of the feelings being up here swirling. Something we work with a lot in our men's circle is we want to disrupt ruminating patterns and patterns of people constantly. I see you do this in your work too, of they're victims, addicted to a feeling. Because the feelings have powers. Can be really heady. Sadness can be incredibly powerful. Anger, each of these emotions has its power to become intoxicating. I think too. And I see how the flow, the body, to me, the antidote to that is the body. But I think also let's think about getting out of victimhood. I think there's a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
I have a lot of ideas coming up, but let's talk a little more. I hear maybe some more thoughts of how to notice when you're going into victimhood and the antidotes in your work to that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, our brains are incredible processes and they're really good at survival. Our brains were wired to survive in the caveman days. They're beautiful at that. The emotional part, the fight or flight mechanism, they're all really good at survival. But at the expense of that survival, we might negate the spiritual aspect of our experience, the integration. And so when we talk about mental loops, which is I think what you were kind of getting at with these places, those mental loops are products of our brain basically saying, this is what happened in the past, so it must be happening in the future in the exact same way. So it's really good when a baby touches a hot stove and then it gets burned and it's like, ouch, the baby's not going to touch the hot stove again. That's what the brain tells it to do. But it's really not in service so much when we want to get close to people and we were burned in the past. When we were children, we devised strategies such as giving ourselves away or not having clear boundaries, or people pleasing or running away as soon as things get uncomfortable. And if we follow the same old stories, there's this kind of impulsivity that happens around the familiar. It's kind of like, oh, why isn't he responding to my text? I'm going to send another text. And there's a part of me that knows I shouldn't, knows that it's data for me, but I can't help it. And I just have to press the send button. Who's been guilty of that? So absolutely, totally normal human behavior. Because we don't want to feel the sadness that comes in. So a lot of our efforts are trying to not feel those places and compensate them with the mental stories. And how do we get out of it, I think is the question.
I think it's getting the question too. And what I'm observing, there's that first level of experience of not feeling any four of the emotions.
Yeah.
Then I see another level where you find one that really works for you. I find one that really works for me. And just to give an example of that, I can, I witness, there's the angry guy. That's an archetype, right? We're talking about men. There's the angry man, right? Because anger is getting him, it can be a strategy. He's just feeling one of these four things very intensely. That's not my strategy. I'm not so comfortable showing being so angry, but I know other men who are, or people who are, if they're being angry, they're getting some kind of, maybe people are keeping their distance from them. Is the strategy is keeping away intimacy or vulnerability, or it's also achieving something else. But I can see how taking one of these emotions and celebrating it too much and connecting it to an ego kind of construct can be just another strategy. If you're not, I do believe from my work with this, there's a reason there are four of them and I want to feel all four and appropriate. There's a cycle in these emotions. Of course, there's no ingredient of this much anger and this much sadness and this much joy. I don't think there's a recipe. It's a natural process. Yeah. But what I'm talking about, I think, is I was seeing how when I get caught in victimhood, I'm often stuck in also one of those emotions too, and or using it to not feel. So I was thinking about both raising the awareness in new ways around victimhood and strategies to pick out when I'm going there. I just saw it happen recently myself, just interacting with my roommate. I had a moment of victimhood of why are you correcting me for this thing in the kitchen? And I'm like, oh, what was that? Where did that come from? And so I know it's just awareness, but I just think I think there's a lot there. So I'm happy to where you want to take victimhood topic.
Yeah, no. And then an example came up that I really want to share. Last week, I could not have a conversation with my partner who's right now in a different place. He's traveling without getting just so angry at him about nothing, he would give me an example of a baby llama being carried by something. And I would just get angry and I would put all of my anger on this situation. And it continued for a week. It was I was like, what is going on with me? And I have the consciousness to be I'm angry about something, it's not about the baby llama. It's not about the pants or the thing or that thing. It's not about these random things. There's an underlying anger. And it took me a couple of days of being upset at random stuff and just being like angry to be like, hey, I am angry. I am not sure why, but I feel like I'm taking it out on all these things and it's not what it's about. It's deeper. And, my partner and I, we've been doing a lot of this work. We're kind of conscious about these places. And we were able to construct a space, a safe space where my anger was allowed. And it ended up being about something much deeper, a lot of fear-based stuff, a lot of no, there was like this energetic no inside of me that was not about the superficial stuff, but about the much deeper constructs about, in our relationship where I was feeling a no that was based on fear, that was based on a place of not showing up, that was kind of this underlying current that I've been kind of neglecting in my emotional body, but that's always been there. And I went through like a deep process energetically with plant medicine. And so I was super sensitive about these things coming up, and this big nose came up. And we ended up having a conversation where I could be in my no and he could tap into his no. And as a result, we felt so much closer. Like there was this big bond that happened that took us on a deeper level just because I could figure out what my no was about and communicate it and be heard in it. And then he could figure out what his no was about and communicate it and be heard in it. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of yes in our relationship. There's so much yes. And it's also unfair to pretend that a no doesn't exist. And we all live in a dual world. I'd be very surprised if there's a relationship out there without an underlying current of no. And the more we explore it, the more we can actually feel closer because we're more closer to our own truth. We're more authentic in our experience. And when we show up in that way, we can build a relationship with much more trust and authenticity because we're in it.
And I've heard another Tantra teacher share this idea that we can't have our intimacy is proportional to our vulnerability.
Yeah.
How much intimacy we get is how vulnerable we are. And you did a beautiful job of that in our first episode, talking about your partner too, and intimate connections, physical connection, of being able to say when you're afraid too. And so I think that really complements, I think, what you shared around relationships in the past too. And I'd imagine that in this work that the emotional work and relationship health, I mean, I'm feeling like I have the intention to grow a new relationship now.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to bring in the emotional work that I've done in a balanced way as part of my question is how can this inner work, my emotional awareness, how can I've seen them as related, that if I want a better relationship in the future and to correct patterns that this podcast probably should have come first on inner emotional work, right? But we flow as we go, right?
Absolutely.
There's a reason it is this way.
Yeah. And it's because, the first need is relationship because we want to feel seen, loved, and connected. But how do we get there? We go a little deeper into the emotions. So that's the natural flow. And in answering your question, that place where it's like in the kitchen, you got a little angry about a thing in the kitchen, about a conversation. It's like, why are you, it's like interesting to explore, like what is there? Because if you're in a relationship, and this happens all the time, and I'm so guilty of this, it's like the taking out the garbage conversation can become a cause for breakup, for divorce, for whatever. But is it about the garbage? Is it about the dishes? Is it about the dirty socks in the corner? No, it's not. It's about this underlying current of like needing to be heard, needing to be shown up for, needing to be seen. And when we're not getting that, the stuff comes up in these superficial ways that can build resentment, can create a lot of distance if we don't tap into what's under.
So, and this is how a lot of our sessions start too, is I'll bring, and I've noticed that what kind of things I can bring now, but I will bring up something that seems small, something where I felt a lot. It could be a future thing or a thing that happened. It could be a small incident. It's like some of our work feels like investigating that interaction, and then it ends up somewhere surprising and really deep. But that it never is, of course, the dishes that are the real problem. It's always something more.
Yeah. So if it's like if somebody told you like, oh, Jake, clean up your dishes. And it brings up, I don't know, maybe some anger and maybe fear of not being good enough, maybe a really young place. And I'm just making things up right now. Like this is not about you. This is just me making things up as an example. Maybe it brings up a really young place where you couldn't get it right when you were little. And there was this place of, I'm not good enough. And is it really, and it touches that place, this place where somebody you're living with, where you feel connected to, says, do this, and it's not good enough. And is it really about the dishes, or is it about a place in you that felt triggered because it was a place of not good enough and not knowing how to be good enough and be scared maybe? And if we show up in that situation and be like, hey, I hear you about the dishes, and I just want to be seen in this place where it really made me feel small and not good enough. And it's about me and my own stuff. But I just felt like I needed to say that to feel connected to, that can and then the other person is like, oh no, really, they might have their own stuff about how everything in their house had to be perfect or else they get beat up. I don't know. I'm also making stuff up. And how there's this fear around not being perfect there, and having that type of connection about the feelings behind the dishes can be incredibly healing. It's like you can get so close around it. Or if we don't address it, it can just be this resentment that grows and that makes you not want to do the dishes because somebody's making you do it,
Well, you're pretty spot on with your intuitive guesses there on things. It wasn't the dishes, but those are some of the feelings that come up for me. But there's so much more. That's where it starts for me. And then another pattern I noticed of a thing strategy you use is, where did you go? Like even when you were telling me that story, I noticed I looked off a little bit. I was going into the incident or going into the past or the future. And I noticed that's another question you ask a lot too, is you're tuning into me and asking, where did I go? And I'm curious about that question too, and what that's about, I guess. How to ask it better.
Yeah. I think all this is so juicy. When when I'm in session with the person, the biggest blessing for me, I can't believe I get to do this for my life, is that I get to be present with people. And when I'm not present with somebody, if I'm not 100% present and I'm going off on something, it's my responsibility. The quality of my work depends on how quickly I ground myself, bring myself to center, and stay and go back to present. That's the quality of my work. If I'm not able to do that, I can't be there for somebody, full stop. And we can't get the results we need. So the way that I work is that I'm tracking the other person, and I'm tracking their body, and I'm tracking my body at the same time, and how everything in front of me lands on me. What emotions I'm feeling, where am I feeling them on my body? And then I get to reflect that back onto the person. So that's how relationships are. Honestly, this is what relationships of any sort are. We're attuned to the other person, we're attuned to ourselves, and we see how that is affecting us and how we're affecting them. And so when I check out, that means that there's a mutual checking out that happens. Or I may not have checked out. I may have caught myself before I check out, but I notice that there's this pull to check out. When we check out and we go into a story, maybe we're thinking about the lunch date that we're about to have, or our next client, or the laundry that we forgot to put into the dryer, I don't know, whatever. That means we do not want to feel the here and now feelings of what's happening right now. So we check out when it becomes too much, when the sadness becomes too much to tolerate. And our defense mechanism from really early childhood is check out. So for example, a newborn from the age of 0 to 3 months, 4 months, has no strategy to cope with its needs not getting met except checking out. It can't even move its head away from the intensity of what's happening. It has to mentally check out. And that strategy is with us through our death, for the most part. And so when we're checking out, it's an indicator to me that we don't want to feel what's happening. We're leaving our body and we go into la la land, which is disconnected from the present. It's usually about the past or the future, survival methods. And if it's in the future, it's always in the relation to how it was in the past, because that's how our brain works. And so my job is helping my clients come back into the present moment. Maybe that requires more grounding work. We stomp our feet. We say some affirmations. We press against the wall. We push. There's an endless amount of creative ways to ground. We check into our feelings. Is it anger, sadness, fear, or sadness or joy that we're feeling right now? Is it new or familiar? And what happened when we check out? Where do we go? Sometimes, after a really powerful emotional release, physical emotional release, let's say somebody's been hitting pillows for a few minutes and saying the word no, or saying like get away, or something that is really charged. They have a big charge that built. The charge becomes really strong and hard to tolerate. And when the charge becomes really hard to tolerate, there's two things that can happen. One is there's a dissociation. So we go into the story. The story may be about what happened to us when we were 4 years old. The story may be whatever. Or the other option is collapse. So collapse into a feeling of smallness, helplessness, victimhood, usually accompanied by crying. Yeah. And in both of those places, we're not in our body. We're collapsed into a place of powerlessness, or we're dissociated. And so I encourage, there's different techniques to work with collapse, and there's different techniques to work with the checking out. But they're both indicators of, I don't want to feel this place. It's too much.
Maybe we can just close with that around collapse, and just hear a little bit about that too, for people who are feeling that now, I felt collapsed. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how to relate to collapse.
How is it what?
How to relate to it, to collapse, and how to either come back from it or to accept it, or how you approach it.
Yeah. Well, I think we all can relate to a place of collapse, right? Like who hasn't felt collapse? Collapse is a place of powerlessness. It's a literal collapse of our energy. So we feel small. Our body is kind of like collapsed. And that can range from hunched shoulders to just being in the corner, little. We feel very young in a place of collapse. We feel powerless, and it's a familiar place. That's how we know we're not in the present moment. It feels young, it feels familiar, it feels powerless. In relating to a place of collapse and helping people break through it, what I would really recommend is feeling your body. So feel your feet and hands. They're like big sensory organs. Feel your feet on the ground, feel your hands on your thighs, on your desk, on your head, like wherever they are. Just feel that contact. And see if you can observe your breath as well. So we're breathing all the time. If we didn't breathe, we would die. But most of the time, we're not conscious of our breath. And our breath is our life force. And so just bringing attention to our body and to our breath goes a huge, huge way. If that is too much, if that is like too much of a step, just start naming what you see around you. So like blue wall, purple plant, red pillow, and just like do that. That helps you come back. Our brains take about 20 minutes to come back from the fight or flight response in the amygdala part of our brain to the frontal cortex, where we're dealing with emotions, with processing, relationships, with all that stuff. So we really need to give ourselves those 20 minutes. And 10, even 10 minutes would really go a long way. But it's 10 to 20 minutes. And it's in those ways, there's a terminology for it. I think it's called cognitive dissonance. But it's a way of doing things different. So it's like if you were always going to be reaching for orange juice because it made you feel better, go for a tea. If your MO is to cry in the corner with a pillow, go for a walk. If you always sit on the right side of the room, sit on the left side of the room. If you're always eating, your peas before your carrots, eat your carrots before your peas. Anything that is different will allow your brain to wire differently in that experience. So start naming what you're seeing. Sing a song, do anything that is different from the way that you usually do it. And your brain will switch. And the quicker that you're able to do things differently, the quicker your brain will switch. That's why also tapping, like EFT, right? Like tapping things, it's really useful because it helps you to associate a brain neurological wiring with a certain sensation that is different from before. And so that is also something really useful. There's a gazillion YouTube tapping videos out there. You don't need to be fancy.
So many great practices.
So many.
And I'm taking that as a challenge too. The next time I'm feeling like I'm going to collapse or I can't deal with it, that I'm going to choose one of those options or just something different than what I would usually do. And giving myself, and not beating myself up if I fail at it, but just that challenge that I'm not going to go for the quick comfort or the quick numbing, whether it could be food or media or just trying to escape, that there's so many other ways to feel. It's a beautiful insight. And I'd love to just close too with also just hearing about how people who want to work with you could work with you, or other offerings, how people can connect to you and your work.
That's amazing. And I want to answer it. And I just also want to say that I don't feel misunderstood. We don't want to bypass collapse.
Yeah.
We want to break through collapse. That's the difference. Because if we bypass it, we're more of the numbing strategy.
I see.
And so
these tools, though, just so I'm understanding them right, that they're not numbing it, they're inviting you to feel more.
Yeah.
So so my thought of it is, instead of I'm going to go eat something sweet and eat too much of it, I might just go for a walk and breathe and think and feel and be present with my body and move the energy, or dance, or just find a different strategy that doesn't bypass through numbing.
Absolutely. And the trick there is you have to know that you're collapsed. That's the work, The work
it's not as visual as like a bridge that collapsed. You don't know.
Yeah.
You can't drive.
When we're collapsed, we're unconscious. We don't have access to the frontal part of our brain that says, this is not about this, there's no light bulb that says you're collapsed until you've been doing this work for a while. And so, the trick is to know when you're collapsing. And so in session, it's a lot easier because I'm there. I can help you. But when you're alone, it takes a certain degree of consciousness to know when you're collapsed. And the guidance for that, is it familiar? Do you feel young? Those things. So how to work with me. Thank you so much for this, for this plug. I'm really grateful. I have different offerings, and I've been really trying to be open to different levels of offerings for different people who may be ready for different things or available, financially or time-wise for different things. So my signature offering is my one-on-one 3-month container. We meet for 60 minutes every week, and it's potent and it's powerful. And, you will come out of it feeling different. I am also starting October 13th. I'm going to have a 4-week small group program on conscious relationship. It's going to be a small program. We're going to meet every week for 60 minutes. The blessing of that is that when one person is processing something or dealing with something, you're going to really feel it in you too, because we're all going through the same things. And so we're going to help each other move through these relationship things. Every week, it's going to be 4 weeks. We're going to talk about inner child wounding for the first week. We're going to talk about boundaries and expression of needs. We're going to talk about sexuality. We're going to talk about kind of the ins and outs of relating. So it's going to be a course based on conscious relationships and how do we build them in our lives, whether you're single or whether you're in a relationship already. It's great for singles. It's great for couples. And I am also having another deep dive one-on-one offering that I have just one spot available now, but I'm going to open more spots in December probably. That works with microdosing psilocybin, because I live in Washington, D.C., and working with microdosing and that to be able to have the rocket fuel for these emotions and these conscious places to come up and then process them in 60-minute sessions weekly. So it's super powerful, super potent. Not for everybody, absolutely not for everybody. But if you're curious, let's hop on a free clarity call and we'll see if it's right for you. Any of these are right for you. I can leave my website and my scheduling link as well.
Yes, the links will be in the description below this episode, wherever you're watching. Connect with Sonia. Highly recommend Sonia. Definitely connect with her. Get on a call with her. I've loved her work. I'm on my second 3-month container with Sonia now and really happy with it. I'm coming away from this conversation as normal in our conversations, feeling inspired. I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling joy. I still feel some sadness in me too, touching on some of the work we do brought up some sadness for me too. So I'm naming that and is still in me right now. But I will say the dominant feeling now is joy and gratitude for you. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much as well. I'm really grateful to have this connection, to have this incredible podcast, to provide the platform for myself and other people who are so passionate about connection. Connection in all the forms of health, of the environment, of, ourselves. And that's what real sovereignty is. It's like, how do we connect with another without giving ourselves away? So thank you so much, Jake and Ari. I'm super grateful for both of you for this opportunity.
That was my conversation with Sonia Zilberman. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow along everywhere we post these. Instagram would be a great place to keep track of us. And right now, I'd like to pass it over again to Ari for our health tip.
Hey, thanks for listening to the episode. I'm sharing here a health tip, which is a practice that's relevant to this conversation with Sonia. So I met Sonia at 5 Rhythms, which is a dance that's been referenced before in the podcast. And we have an episode with Ann Kite on here, one of our 5 Rhythms teacher. And so 5 Rhythms is a conscious movement dance practice that's oftentimes done in a group, but you can do it alone. I do it on my own too. And it's a beautiful way to move through emotions. Now, you may come into the dance with a story or with a certain experience, but when the music goes and you go through the system that it brings you through, there's a lot of emotional freedom and healing that I've experienced and that many other people who currently dance 5 Rhythms go through. So the basic understanding is that there is a wave. You start out with fear, and you're kind of getting attuned to dancing. You're moving from stillness into any feelings of maybe rigidity, and you're slowly loosening out your body, just being present with the experience of maybe discomfort. Then staccato is the next phase of the wave. And that's when the energy builds, and it's oftentimes drums and very sharp movements are encouraged. And whatever emotion comes up, but it could be anger, for example, is something that could be expressed through the body. Then you got chaos. Chaos is where you go absolutely crazy and you could be crying, you could be laughing, and anything is going on there. The dance then takes you over to a more happy, lyrical type energy where you can experience joy or even like the liberation that comes from moving through kind of the harder emotions. and back into stillness. The reason why I share this as a health tip or health practice is to share with you that there's other ways that you can experience emotions and emotional liberation through movement, both the movement of the body and movement of the emotions at the same time. So the way to practically apply this is you can go to a 5 Rhythms class. You can look up 5 Rhythms audio tracks or videos online, or you could practice just simply this method on your own. Find a song that gets you starting to move. Find a song that gets you going. Find a song that lets you go crazy and let go into chaos. A happy song, and then into stillness. And this is a great way to feel that emotional release. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Passing it back to Jake.
It's a wonderful tip. And I also have had a lot of emotional unfolding, I would say, or emotional depth happen for me through 5 Rhythms. I've danced for years, and I find this wave process that you described as incredibly powerful to move emotions, get in my body. I also met Sonia at dance, so it feels like a very appropriate tip today. If you're not in the DC area too, we mentioned Ann Kite. She offers a Wednesday at noon online practice too. It's a great place to get started if you feel more comfortable starting on your computer in your home with a real teacher. And I think what's special about Ann too is to have a teacher guide you and talk you through the dance your first time with some guidance that's who I started with, my teacher. So I'd say that's a really beautiful point, a very accessible place to try your first 5 Rhythms dance. So great idea, Ari, bringing this tip. Thanks again for listening, and keep on growing.